Hello, friends. This is Jim here, Science Talk, and I wish to share with you a study that's been published in the journal Global Environmental Change. The two primary authors are Dr. Martin Persson of Chalmers University of Technology in Sweden and Dr. Florence Pendrell, also at Chalmers. And what they examined was the human demand for food is helping to drive the destruction of global rainforests. Well, they have actually quantified this, and they've looked at how Europe's food imports leave tropical soils scorched, and therefore greenhouse gas emissions increased. So, they've worked out how European consumers can reduce tropical forest loss and cut down greenhouse emissions. 1. Stop buying beef, especially from Brazil. And 2. Be sparing with the oil from tropical palms and soybean plantations. Right? Palm oil, soybean, though it takes a lot to produce whatever amount it's typically found in a bottle. I don't know. I don't use those products, so I'm not sure what the volume is. But I do know that it does take a lot of trees to produce these items. Trees that have to be harvested, meaning that they're cut down. At least with maple syrup, it may take 100 gallons to give you 1 gallon, but at least the trees are left standing. Now, of course, this comes as no surprise if people pay attention to this. Forests absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere that they help draw down the CO2. If you have all that surface area from all the leaves and so forth, more so than what you get with grassland, that means forests can draw down more CO2 than grasslands. But when you knock down the forest, for farming, for raising cattle, or if you just burn and clear for oil plantations, well, guess what? You're going to now put more CO2 back into the atmosphere. So, as I said, in this first report, Global Environmental Change, they looked at the loss of these Dr. Persson and Pendrell. They looked at the loss of tropical rainforests and then at the ways in which the felled or scorched forests have been used for food production. And then in another study published in the journal Environmental Research Letters, they took the measure of CO2 emissions that might be linked to food production from the destroyed rainforests, and they worked out from World Trade data where that food went. So they wrote two stories, two publications, two reports, one published in the journal Global Environmental Change and the other in Environmental Research Letters. And they basically looked at, so they're not only looking at the consumption, but they're looking at the damage left behind on the rainforest, and then to see, okay, the food that came from where the rainforests were damaged, were ruined, where was that stuff exported to? The European Union as a whole is a huge importer of food. There's very little land left. It's pretty crowded over there in Europe. The conclusion is that 1/6 of the emissions from a typical EU diet can be traced directly back to deforestation in the tropics. 1/6. In effect, this is a statement from Dr. Persson, in effect you could say that the EU imports large amounts of deforestation every year. If the EU really wants to achieve climate goals, it must set harder environmental standards on those who export food to the EU. Dr. Pendrell, his co-author on these two reports, states, we can see that more than half of deforestation is due to the production of food and animal feed such as beef, soybeans, and palm oil. Food exports are rising. These authors continue. There is a big variation between different countries and goods, but overall, exports account for about a fourth of that deforestation, which is connected to food production. These figures have increased during the period we have looked at. The principles are clear. Shift away from the dependence on fossil fuels. Preservation and growth of the world's forests is one of the priorities, as well as changing the diets. If you change the diet, if you move away from fossil fuel, if you preserve the world's forests, you can limit or slow down greenhouse gas emissions and limit what's happening to the climate. Other researchers have repeatedly stressed that a shift away from a meat diet could reduce emissions. A global switch to crops rather than cattle would mean greater output from existing farmland excuse me, and help save forests everywhere. In other videos I have made, I have discussed this very principle. This is basic ecology 101. It is not difficult. Okay? And it involves trophic levels. When you have different trophic levels, there is a loss of energy in the transfer from one trophic level to the next. So for example, let's say I have 1,000 acres of land. I could use that 1,000 acres to grow maize. Okay? And you get a lot of output. You get a lot of tons for those 1,000 acres. But if I turn around, and that's just, you just put the corn seeds in the ground, they germinate, sunlight energy, they do their thing, they grow, photosynthesize, you get food, you harvest it. That's one trophic level. Right? They're the producers. So the first trophic level is the producers. The second trophic level is the primary consumers. Third trophic level is the secondary consumer. And if you get to the fourth trophic level, that's a tertiary consumer, which is organisms really high up on the food chain. Something like polar bear. Well, the reason why polar bear is not doing well, in addition to losing the ice, they're a top predator. They eat seals, seals eat fish, fish eat zooplankton, zooplankton eat phytoplankton. Quite a few levels there, which is why you don't see a lot of polar bears. As you go up from trophic level to trophic level, the biomass at each trophic level is greatly reduced. Think of it as a pyramidal shape. Wide base is the producers. As you go up the trophic levels, it gets narrower and narrower because that's reducing biomass. There's less available energy that makes it to the next level, because a lot of the energy is lost through respiration, defecation, urination, that kind of stuff. An animal has to pant to cool itself. Okay, what humans would sweat. Well, that's tied into respiration. But still, a lot of the energy is lost from trophic level to trophic level. So going back to my little scenario here, 1,000 acres, if I dedicated to corn, or number of crops, but to grow plants, that will feed more people than if I try to raise cattle on that. Because if I raise cattle on that 1,000 acres, I may, if the farmer's lucky, get 1/10, maybe 1/100th, but you're not going to get the amount of biomass from the same landmass as you would from growing plants. So there's an inefficiency. So let's just throw numbers: 1,000 acres, and let's say that I get 100,000 kilograms of corn from that 1,000 acres. That same 1,000 acres, I might only get 100 head of cattle. Okay, so if you look at what the land produces, you get far more from growing plants than from raising livestock, in other words. So the recommendation is a correct one. Grow more plants, raise less beef. And also, don't forget, cow flatulence is a major source of methane. So you're using land in an inefficient manner, and they got cows on there farting away, adding to methane in the atmosphere. There you have it. So, yeah, it's just not good there. So I'm running through the numbers here. If I got 100 head of cattle, what's a head of cattle about? Maybe 500 pounds. So 500 times 100, that's about what, 50,000 pounds that you get for the 1,000 acres. Whereas you might get with the corn, you might get 100,000, maybe 1,000,000 kilograms of food. Depending on how tightly how much you grow, how many corns you grow, and that kind of stuff. But you're going to get considerably more from planting plants than trying to raise livestock. In general, many developed countries have begun to enlarge the space covered by forest canopy, but the tropical rainforests remain at risk from drought, wildfire linked to climate change, from direct human invasion in pursuit of yet more space to exploit for cattle and oil plantations. Greenhouse gas emissions from rainforests are on the increase. So they're becoming a source, not a sink. So the trees would normally draw down the CO2. Well, they're being cut, so many of them being cut down that the grasslands are not going to draw down the same amount of CO2. The CO2 is now a source from what was once tropical rainforests. Now, the EU already has strict rules about the provision of timber and wood products from exporting countries. These have already helped protect some areas of the vulnerable tropical rainforest. The next challenge is to see whether such regulations can be effectively tailored to food imports. The scientists found that between 2010 and 2014, around 2.6 billion tons of carbon dioxide escaped from ranches, croplands, and plantations on cleared forest land. Of this, 900 million tons of CO2 came from cattle meat, much of it from Brazil, 600 million from palm oil and soybean plantations, almost half of this from Indonesia. So Dr. Pendrell states, now as the connection between food production and deforestation is made clearer, we should start to discuss possibilities for the EU to adopt similar regulations for food imports. Quite simply, deforestation should end up costing the producers more. She concludes, if you give tropical countries support in their work to protect the rainforest, as well as giving farmers alternatives to deforestation to increase production, it can have a big, noticeable impact. So there you have it. We need to switch away from fossil fuels. Switch from eating meat. Don't eat as much of it as normally do. Eat less of it, far less of it. Become vegetarian. And grow more plants. Use the land for plants, not livestock. Again, the researchers are making their recommendations. It's now up to politicians to pay heed. Thank you for your time. Hey folks, this is Jim here reminding you to please subscribe to my channel and please share my videos with others. Also remember to click the bell so that you know when I drop in a new video. I also ask that you please consider becoming a patron of my channel and support the work that I do by going to patreon.com/Science Talk with Jim Massa, each word separated by an underscore, and becoming a patron. It's asking for as little as $3 a month, cost of a cup of coffee, to support the work I do and keep my informative videos coming your way. Thank you. Thank you for your support.